There we go.
So for this group, I'm sure that almost everybody here is familiar with timetables. If you remember back in the day, prior to Amtrak,
Oh, yeah.
each railroad had their own timetable for passengers. All the information that passengers needed to know to book travel and be prepared to travel and connect around the country. But there were also employee timetables, and here's a couple that I've collected along the way. These are the employee timetables. Have information that's important to the employees who are running the trains and running the railroad. So the information that they contain is a little bit different than the information in the passenger timetables. And that ignited a spark in my poor head. And I decided, well, maybe I can take that one step further and create an employee timetable for a model railroad.
Yep.
Which would be a little bit different configuration. And again, I assume most everybody's seen employee timetables at different times. This is one for the Chicago Northwestern Galena Division. And up here in the top right corner is a timetable for the branch line that went through my town of Belvedere next to Rockford. And there wasn't a whole lot of traffic on that line, but in fact, I was kind of surprised to see two different trains on there. But schedules for different lines of the railroad, branch lines and main lines, and a lot of additional instructions, details about the railroad, operating instructions, speed limits, signaling, train control variations. If the railroad went from DTC to CTC in a different place, that would be allocated or identified in the employee timetable. So the employee timetable has a lot of information for employees. Here's another example from the Chicago Central and Pacific. This one's a little bit later in time, early 90s. And signaling information in here, among other things. And the branch, again, that I'm interested in, from Chicago to Wallace Yard in Freeport. And then from Freeport all the way to Waterloo. So all of that information. I did notice that this doesn't really have schedules for trains in here, but it does have information about different sidings, where they're located and how long they are, which obviously would be important to the railroad employees. Here are a couple examples from that are even more current, one for the CN and one for the CNO. And it's interesting to see that these are now in binders, so the railroad can save a little bit of money by printing individual pages as they change, rather than having to reproduce an entire timetable. Here are a couple of samples from model railroads, Jack Ozanich's Atlantic Great Eastern and Mike Burgett's CNO Clifton Forge Division. I've been lucky enough to operate on both of those, and the employee timetables contain an awful lot of information about the railroads, but they're written as if they were written for a real railroad. So there is not really the information that a new attendee or a newbie at a model at a session on these layouts might need to know. It's kind of difficult to dive into that timetable and learn it in the 15 minutes or so or half an hour before you start an operating session. So I wanted to try and bridge that gap a little bit. And so this is an initial draft of a timetable that I've developed for the Blackhawk lines. And this has been a while in gestation. I actually started this about 4 or 5 years ago. and then kind of hit a roadblock trying to figure out how to get all the pieces together and collected and into the timetable to be able to show to people. So with that, I'm going to see if I can figure out news share maybe. Okay, so I've got this up now. There we go. All right, so I started off with the with the cover, and then in the index will kind of give you an overview of what I wanted to cover, kind of a welcome for new people to the railroad, an overview of the railroad itself and some of its history, how it evolved. And then we'll move into some of the system maps to try to put it in a real geographic location. We'll talk about some of the schedules. I have a page here for the typical DCC function settings for train crews as they're trying to manage the throttle. A dispatcher's diagram of the entire railroad. The Tibbs table, which explains the routing for the waybills. Again, for the dispatcher's point of view, a listing of the trains that typically run in a day. I have a page in here that I'm not sure I'm going to keep. I've listed some of the advanced consists that I use, and then descriptions of the trains and town diagrams, and following at the end of this instructions for different crews. So kind of step through this kind of quickly to give you an idea. So for the crews, as they arrive at the railroad, some of the general guidelines for operation and where things are located in the basement. A little bit of how we operate. A couple of very general rules for operation how to communicate with the dispatcher. A local rule that I've got: westbound trains leaving Chicago staging sit in the bell block for 20 minutes just to eat time. But westbound trains don't need to do that. An overview of the railroad and how it came to be. And some of the history. And a brief description of Tibbs codes and what they are. My operators have a different acronym for them. So this is a view of the railroad. It crosses northern Illinois from Chicago to Dubuque. So I have the Blackhawk line itself operating on CNW trackage to Rockford, or to Freeport, I'm sorry. And then IC trackage over to Dubuque and some of the other railroads in the area. And this is a schematic diagram of the railroad showing some of the interchange or the connection points of the railroad. Chicago on the east end, Iowa on the west end, Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Savannah, Galesburg, Kansas City. So this kind of fits it into the geography. And then I explode that Blackhawk box to show the various towns in order going across the railroad and the Tibbs code for each of those locations. Schedule for westbound trains. And for eastbound trains. schedule for some of the local and interchange trains. And Milwaukee Road trains, BN trains, and Milwaukee Road trains that interchange with Blackhawk. DCC settings on the throttle. The brake is probably the most important one next to the horn. And a dispatcher's diagram of the railroad. So I can show where the sidings are, where the major yards are. My TIBS table. So all of the TIBS codes from A to Z. Chicago is the A. Z codes are Iowa. And most of the Blackhawk is in the shaded area, B through P, and then interchange with Milwaukee Road and BN. And a dispatcher's view of the trains that get run during the day and where they work in Rockford, Wallace, which is Freeport, or Dubuque. And these are the normally scheduled trains. What's not shown here is any extras that get called for a session. Description of the trains. Northwestern westbound trains. And I have a brief description of what the train does, where it works or does not work, and how the train is blocked. Whether it's a daily or an extra train. Trains are all listed by railroad, by number, and by name. Illinois Central westbound trains. There are a lot of trains. They don't all get called. Eastbound trains, Northwestern. IC.
Fur ball.
Yeah, the fur ball's kind of fun.
I see that right.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a story behind that.
I'm sure.
One of the IC conductors, Chet, and I'm sorry, I've forgotten his last name, worked out of Wallace Yard. And he came back from vacation one time. They had renamed the local job, which ran, in his case, east from Wallace to a little place called Burlington, Illinois, which is a little bit west of Elgin, Illinois. And so they took the initials from the two towns, Freeport and Burlington, put them together, FRBL. That came back to the operation. He said, "What the heck is this?" They said, "Oh, well, it's obviously the fur ball." So the name stuck.
Can I ask, is the daily a scheduled train? When it
I'm
says
sorry?
daily, the daily is a scheduled train?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a local turn that runs daily.
got it.
The Furball West goes west from Freeport.
Yep.
In his case, the Furball was really the east local turn. I've operator's license, I've used the name for both trains, both the west turn and the east turn. BN trains at interchange. East and west. And Milwaukee Road trains. One more interesting detail on this. 502 is Timetable East on the Milwaukee Road. But on the section of Blackhawk where it runs, it's considered a westbound train, Railroad West.
That's possible.
And its counterpart. This is the page I'm not sure I want to keep in here. This is a list of my advanced consists for throttle purposes. And then we start getting into the town maps. Rockford is a major town with a number of industries. I have the TIBS codes for each of the industries identified on here, and a listing of the names of the industries, customers, and the instructions for the Rockford Yardmaster. Instructions for blocking. I put the three major locations, Rockford, Freeport, and Dubuque, in the front of this. Here's Freeport. And Freeport Yardmaster instructions. Dubuque Yard. And Dubuque Yardmaster instructions. And the town maps for the smaller towns. Pecatonica and Rydot are real locations that nobody's ever heard of.
Heard of Pecatonica, that's a river.
It is a river. In fact, I think the Pecatonica River goes through Freeport, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it does.
Lena, Apple River are towns west of Freeport, along with Scales Mound and Galena. Galena, people have probably heard of.
Yeah. Well, Scales Mound is supposed to be the highest point in Illinois.
It is. Yeah, it's
elevation.
Yes. It's not very high. Most states look down on Illinois' high point.
Yeah. Well, it's all downhill from there. Yeah.
There you go. And then Dunleith and Peosta are between Dubuque and Iowa staging. And we kind of wrap up the document with some general operator instructions. Again, just reiterating, it's a joint operation of the IC and the Northwestern, but there's interchange with both Milwaukee and BN. Operation by DTC and track warrant. Facing the layout, you're always looking north, so that helps with direction. Oh yes, train crews need to contact the yardmaster before flying into the yard.
I like it. Dispatch throttle, the road release.
Yep. Staging yard operator is an optional position. I don't fill that very often, but someone could have worked my, 3 of my staging yards are stacked on top of each other. Chicago, Iowa, and Minneapolis. And then finally, instructions for the road crews. Find your train at the correct location. Train packet has the train information, where the train is going, what towns you will work or not work.
Bob, what do you
map.
mean? Bob, what do you mean by dispatch the throttle? Right
Oh.
above the road crews.
Yes, my layout is controlled by Digitrax, and Digitrax throttle has a dispatch option
Oh,
to release the throttle from the train.
okay.
And it takes it out of the stack in the computer, where
Yes.
release does not. So therefore, it's definitely gone, and when another operator picks it up.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Train card will tell you what the train is supposed to do. Repeat the instruction. The train crews need to know, contact the yard master.
How do they do that?
Um,
Phone system or radios?
I use the home radios,
Okay,
but when the train is on the doorstep, ready to enter yard limits, it's probably easier just to call out, "Hey, yard master, I'm here." And that's it.
Very nice.
how about fast clock? You must run a fast clock, no?
Yes,
What's
I
the
do.
ratio? What's
And
fast
that
clock
is in
ratio?
1.6 to 1.
1.6, okay.
Wow.
How long are
There's
your
a-
sessions?
My sessions, I like to run my sessions at 5 hours. At that fast clock ratio, that gives you an 8-hour trick in one operating session.
Mhm.
Now, my curiosity would be with the timetable you have, do you have one at just each location? Or do you give one to each operator? Is the timetable also broken into like a general instruction sheet that goes with each packet and each train?
The timetable is basically a half a page in a portrait view. So the view that I showed in the PowerPoint, I don't know if I can pull that back up again. Yeah. That view is what it looks like. So
Okay.
it's pretty big at this point, and it's still really in a draft stage. I have not used it in an operating session yet. I'm still proofreading it. Once I get everything cleaned up, I will print out probably half a dozen or a dozen copies. So I will have enough for operators
Okay.
to use during a session.
How many full operators do you have, if I may ask? Well,
I
full crews, how many
normally
are-
run with ideally 10 to 12.
Okay, and you said Digitrax, are you also going with Wi-Fi these days? Like the new TCS throttles, or just the phone systems? Like Wi-Fi?
I've installed one of the LNWY receivers on that, so I can tolerate up to 4. One of those is taken by my proto throttle.
Okay. Ah,
I do have some operators who like to use the phone throttle. Not too many, and I have enough throttles to give to my operators, so usually don't need the Wi-Fi throttle.
okay.
Other questions?
What does TIB stand for again? I can't remember.
Train transfer in block section.
Uh-huh.
It was used by several railroads. I know Santa Fe was one of them. And I know there were some others that used it. And I know some operators who use it very extensively. Excuse me. I like it because it gives me a chance to identify the places on the railroad alphabetically from end to end. And that
Right.
makes it a little bit easier for operators to try and figure out. Let me go back to that table.
Do you also have industry numbers then for each industry? Or
Yes,
just, you do, they also
Yes.
get blocked for east-west trains by, at the end of the
Um,
yards?
yeah, let me pull up the,
Here we go.
okay, so my major location, Chicago staging is A. The locations on the railroad, basically B through P. K is an interchange point, N is an interchange, K is an interchange point to the BN. N is an interchange point to the BN. K2 is an interchange point to the Milwaukee Road. And then Z is are all the Iowa staging points. So I can have waybills set up to go to Owine or Des Moines or North Platte or Omaha or Waterloo or Fort Dodge. But the Tibbs code for those will be Z something. Either Z1 would be Northwestern, Z3 would be Illinois Central, but they're all going to the same staging yard. Likewise with A1 is designated for a Northwestern location. A3 is for an IC location. A2 and Z2 are locations that can, where a car can be routed by either of those two railroads. So in Chicago, A2 represents Belt Clearing Yard, and Z2 represents Cedar Rapids.
Hmm.
So both railroads went to those locations. And then as I look at down, pardon me for scrolling, but as I get down to one of the town locations here, here's Rockford. Rockford's Tibbs code is C.
Yep.
And then C23 is going to be Leibovich Scrapyard.
Okay, okay,
Okay.
now it makes sense. So you could block each train by town, it'll end up blocked by town as well as by individual industry, which might be the best way to move into that town. Okay,
Right, right. So my through trains will leave the C block of cars for Rockford. Then the Rockford operator gets to sort out which what the industry location is.
Yep.
And the smaller towns along the way, where'd that go? Yeah. Like Pecatonica. Pecatonica is Tibbs code D, and then the individual locations are here. I didn't really put down locations for that. These small towns are switched by one of the fur balls, either the east or west fur ball. And that train will be able to sort out the cars for the individual industries in the town.
does the dispatcher keep a train sheet on all these movements?
Yes.
Okay. That's a lot to work.
It is, and
The
I've noticed that
dispatcher's
as I've
gotta
gone
know
to
the
different layouts too. Every railroad is different. There are different things to learn on each railroad, different things that are important on each railroad, and that learning process is can be a bit of a challenge. So I wanted to capture some of that and put it in a timetable to kind of help the operators along through that first session or two.
So Bob, how big is the layout in like, uh, square feet basis or whatever?
Oh, gosh.
If you can handle 12 operators and all these, destinations. Like what's,
It's roughly 40 by 30.
Hmm.
The main line is about 400 feet on two and a half levels,
Mm.
oh,
on 2 levels.
It was 400 feet main line?
Main line is 400 feet.
Okay. What type of Digitrax? You mentioned Digitrax, which I use. I'm just curious, what throttles do you like the best for your operators?
I'm still using the UT throttles.
Okay,
The older ones, not the newest ones. I have used the newest ones. I like the newest ones, but I haven't gotten used to using them yet. And again, I haven't really. I need the receiver for those before I can really use them. So
that's the duplex you're referring to as newer?
they
Or
are
or the six?
no the newest ones, the UT 600 series.
UT6, okay.
Yeah, mine are all the UT Fords. I'm sorry.
So are mine, yep, older. No
I
duplex.
really like the feel of the new ones. But I have not gotten used to running with the new ones yet.
Okay. A lot of the new young guys want to use either the phones or, well, TCS has come up with that nice, wonderful Wi-Fi throttle with the knob and very ergonomic. I just purchased one.
I have used that, and that is a nice throttle too. Yes.
The other, I'm curiosity on your Pro throttle.
Yes.
Do you one operator, or do you normally have to run at least a 2-person crew so one can engineer, so to speak, with all the bells and whistles on that prototype throttle? Or
I have, yeah, that throttle is is normally used in the Freeport yard, and I have used it with 2 people. Had a person who was not as mobile, had trouble standing. So I have a stool at the end of the yard, and proto throttle operator can sit on the stool and operate it, and the yard master then works as his brakeman.
okay.
I like to use it myself when I'm doing restaging and cleaning up
great.
after the session. Then I can use it and it's fun, and it doesn't matter that it takes me a long time to do it.
We found that it takes usually 2-man crews because of one engineer and one conductor, normally we call it, yeah. for what it's
I
worth.
would agree with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Anything, what else?
Was as far as moving cars, do you have individual car cards or do you use switch
Nope.
lists?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Car cards and way bills.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Car cards, okay.
So they are part of the packet for each train that
Okay.
that goes along. And I have included cards for the engines and caboose as well.
How about dispatch your verbal orders, or you're using warrants? Do you actually write the warrants during a session, or do you have dispatcher issue verbal warrants?
My warrants are probably as simple as you could possibly get.
Right.
The dispatcher gives authority to the train crew to run a certain number of blocks, and the time of authorization for that, and the train crew keeps that information. So the only thing they really need to write down is the time and the number of blocks
Okay,
Cool.
that they're tracking. I would like to go to a more sophisticated, more accurate warrant system, but I haven't gotten there yet.
so there's no OSing really in between with the warrants.
With the warrants, there's usually no need to OS.
Okay,
However,
right.
if I've got trains following, then I may instruct the crew to OS the stations.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
Yeah, when we run it again, Bob?
Funny you should ask. My crew's been asking me that. I haven't run for several months, and I really need to get set up and have a session. Yep.
Right, Alan?
Not me.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Come on.
Nice job, Bob. I think it bears mentioning that Bob has been working on documentation of this railroad for
Oh,
many years. So you don't just wake up one day and say, "Oh, I think I'll make an employee timetable." and-
Oh, no. Oh, this,
So,
and the research that has to go into it.
yeah, really nicely
There's a
done.
lot of research goes into it.
Yeah. So
It was kind of fun in this case because, as I mentioned earlier, the Blackhawk is really a joint operation of the Illinois Central and Northwestern, and the rationale behind that is explained in the overview of the railroad. But because of that choice, I then had to create a schedule of trains that accommodated both railroads. And I had some information for the IC, or some rough information for the IC, but the information I had goes back to late steam, early diesel, when the IC was still a pretty busy railroad at that point. They were running a couple of 2 or 3 passenger trains a day, plus the meat trains, plus general freight, and exchange trains or through trains that went all the way to Omaha and Sioux City and Sioux Falls. So it was a busy railroad back then, and I had some of that schedule information. My time period is the early 90s, and a lot of that traffic had disappeared off the railroad. The passenger traffic was gone, the meat trains were gone, and the IC was really, in fact, in my era, it really would have been Chicago Central and Pacific, and it was down to probably not more than about 4 trains a day, as I understand. I don't think it was more than about 4 trains a day.
Can I ask another question now that all your beautiful maps, like the one up on the screen for the 2 towns, what software package did you use to draw the town maps? I've had to do mine by hand because I don't know.
PowerPoint,
All done in PowerPoint? Okay.
yes.
Good
And
question.
it really wasn't all that hard. It really wasn't all that hard to do it. I'd start out with a couple of lines for the tracks, and I could make my connections. I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but
Yes.
but I could make the connections, and then I would just make blocks
Text blocks.
for the various industries, letter them, and move them into place.
It's
It
the
really
lines
wasn't
I
that
was
difficult.
interested in. Okay. Those are well done rather than drawing them by hand. They're beautiful.
It helps. My control, I have control panels on the fascia for the railroad that are similar, and yeah, it helps a lot to have these kinds of guides.
all right.
Okay,
Well,
thanks.
really nice job, Bob. Thanks for
Yep.
presenting. Next week we're off. So we will get together again on the 20th, and we have Jason Clockey is tentatively scheduled. I need to confirm with him, but but that's what we're hoping for. So after that, our schedule's open. So if you're interested in presenting, just let Ron or me know, and we'll get you on the calendar.
Okay.
All right. So enjoy your Valentine's Day off, or Valentine's Day Eve, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Good night, everybody.
Thank
All right.
you.
Have a
All
great
right.
Good
Thursday.
night, Bob.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thanks, Bob.